One thing we hear constantly from industrial teams is they've got machines everywhere, no unified way to actually see and use data in real time.
Yeah, the data exists, but the insight doesn't. And that's exactly where an open industrial application platform like Flowfuse comes in.
Totally. This episode is made possible by Flowfuse. They help operations, maintenance, and IT teams connect any machine, move data between any systems, model it in the data platforms you already use, and scale industrial applications across sites, all on an open, future proof platform built on Node-RED with enterprise grade security and governance.
What I like is it's not just about integration, it's operational confidence. You get a single, trusted industrial data layer with centralized management and security, so you can actually trust what your systems are telling you.
Connect, collect, build, scale with Flowfuse. Hello and welcome to Unplugged, an IoT podcast where we dive into the fascinating world of industrial Internet of Things and automation. I'm your host, Phil Seboa.
G'day, Phil. Hi, everyone. My name's Ed Fuentes. Phil, one of our favorite topics, IT, OT. We're in that space today, and talking to people, especially who've played across both sides, and not just both sides, but in that sort of area around industries that have regulations like pharmaceuticals, but have had a broad experience across industrial automation, seen what's been possible from an IT, engaged OT, created at Unison that we always love talking about, is our guest today, someone who's involved in the space, who's had quite a long history in that area. His name is Howard Sachs. So, Howard, thank you so much for joining our podcast today.
Thank you very much. It's really fantastic to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Howard works across Australia and New Zealand's industrial and water sectors, helping organizations improve reliability sustainably and with technical confidence. His background spans industrial automation, digitalization, water treatment, commercial leadership, and community impact. Howard, it's great to have you on the show. Maybe you can give us a little bit around your background and how you found yourself in this great industry of ours.
Thanks again for having me here. I love the work that you guys do. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I, as most of us, the way that we kind of get into our industries, we don't necessarily plan for that to be the case. We just somehow find ourselves there. For me, the story started back at university. I'm an electrical engineer. I was doing my engineering at the time towards the back end. And I got involved with Siemens, actually, because they were interacting at a university level where there were some projects for the students to do, and they were all very real world projects. That is my first my first moment of working with PLCs and drives and pneumatics and all of that kind of stuff in a real world application. From there was also some very early embers of AI. It was, when I say early embers, there were neural networks and a little bit of fuzzy logic, but nothing like what we know today. I mean, I'm talking quite a few years ago. And from that, it pushed me into that whole industrial side of the world. So I started working for Schneider. I moved over to Siemens. I would actually describe it that I was maybe born at university. I had my real fledgling child years at Schneider. And then I grew to become a adolescent and an adult. And I don't quite want to say a grandfather because that would be very disrespectful to some very, very intelligent people that are still there. But certainly I grew up in the Siemens organization. With that, I had a very, very privileged career over there to be exposed to multiple different industries, whether it was chemicals, pharmaceuticals, water, wastewater, defense, manufacturing, mining, doesn't matter, you name it, there was a touch point. And now I want to maybe just also kind of pull that back to give a teeny bit more of a background. So that's more on the commercial side. There's a community side that's also I've had a very strong affinity to. Today, I am chairing the board of a food rescue organization. We do approximately 50,000 meals a month just in Victoria alone. So coupled with that technology and the industry side, and then the community side, that's essentially where I am today.
So through that journey, Howard, working for a large multinational company like Siemens and Schneider, and obviously with your work you're doing with the charity, technology is a very important part of that equation. How technology comes together, how it works. Like when you were at Siemens and Schneider, what were the technology challenges that you were? Because I suppose as a person working with end users, helping them in their innovation or transformation or whatever that automation looked like, what were the main challenges you saw that they were facing?
So I think it's important to have a backdrop of what we sit within Australia. And for the better, as not just Australia, it's actually globally. For the better part, we live in a capitalist environment. And that is make more money. How do you make more money? You sell more or you spend less. And our customers always feel that, whether they are primary producers, whether they are OEMs, it doesn't actually matter. They all are just trying to do more with less. When you talk about or you ask about the challenge, that's the backdrop that everybody seems to be facing, unless it's obviously a social enterprise, which let's park that for a second. What we've seen from technology as a whole is that we are all living certainly better lives. We can get around better than we used to be able to. We're living longer. We fighting diseases better. We've been pulled out of poverty. Like well, many people, countries have been pulled out of poverty, and it's all through technology. So within these larger organizations, the challenges were always how does technology get applied to any of those particular use cases? One of them could have been, for example, a manufacturer saying, we need to produce whatever might be paint or we need to produce a particular medicine. How do we get that to be a reliable product that we can put out to our customers, whoever that customer might be, in a resilient, repeatable way that is essentially it's that golden batch that people talk about or that we talk about of how do you have the perfect amount of inputs to have that perfect output that is just repeatable again and again and again. And that's going to be done through various different technology. I mean, like it could be done today through AI, trying to work towards that all the way down to your sensors, and maybe it's a flow meter, pressure transmitter, whatever it is, doesn't matter. And then a PLC and an MES, and blah, blah, blah in between. So, yeah, there you go.
In those challenges you would have faced or the customers faced, and they had to make decisions between choosing technologies. How was that process like? Because you would have been offering a technology and they're looking, because there are lots of technologies out there that solve problems. What were some of the key parts of that
Yeah.
process for them to come to the conclusion?
So I think in the thing that I've come to learn, and in particular, this is more so from being on the outside of a major multinational, is let's take a PLC as an example. You put that PLC or a drive and you put it into a cabinet and you close the cabinet door. No one cares what the brand is. It's essentially a black box function. That's what started happening over time. And yes, there are benefits in terms of an overarching ecosystem with getting the communication between the things. So I don't think people are crazy concerned about the technology. It's much the same as if somebody wants to buy a car, and I'm going to lean on the automotive industry quite a bit today because I think it's very descriptive. So people don't really necessarily care if they're getting into a BM or a Mercedes or a Mazda or a Tesla or whatever. They just want to know for the better part that they can go from A to B. They're not going to break down, and it's happy days. What then comes out and sits behind that, and this is the challenge in terms of any kind of sale for whoever's trying to sell their product. It's how do you de-risk it for the customer? So how do you say, yeah, you know what? My product it's certainly going to do the job. Maybe somebody else's product can be 5% better. Maybe it's got a little feature, but do you really need that feature? Yes, no, maybe. Anyway, we get to a baseline. Is the product acceptable? And then it comes down to that safety net of who's coming to the table to really help make sure that this is going to work. What's the supply like? What's the warranty like? Are there, for example, bank guarantees that are required to ensure that any risk of engaging in that technology is taken away? That's a bigger challenge to try and overcome. And for people that have been, and I'm sure you have discussed this previously around, for example, solution selling versus product selling. The product sale is very transactional. Buy my product, and then I'm going to move away. That doesn't really help unless you want to go and buy, for example, milk or bread or whatever. For the better part, customers are saying, help us really define what we want to achieve. We think we know, but you help us, and then help take away the commensurate risk with it. Because with all the stuff that we talk about, it carries a disproportionate risk value, monetary value for the risk. So in terms of a little sensor or a small PLC or something, if something goes wrong, it's really catastrophic to a facility where if something goes wrong on the civils, the number's a lot bigger, but maybe they put a door where there shouldn't have been, or it's not as catastrophic generally to the production.
So I guess during your conversations with the customers, how do you bring them along the journey? How do you build that trust factor when you're, engaging with them? You're trying to tease out that problem that they're trying to solve. How do you build that trust with them?
I think the best way that I can explain it today, because this is really first principles for me. So previously, when I was at a larger multinational, you've got the power of the brand. And that brand is phenomenal for opening doors, for getting traction. People know that they're very deep pockets within these organizations. That truly helps with an inherent bias towards that stick with a company like that. So why I say I'm going to go back to first principles is because I am no longer in these multinationals. I am in, to a very large extent, and probably cover it, an Amazon for industry, where we have got a master distributorship for some major brands, which globally are phenomenally well known, but locally not as much. And now it's a case of how do you build trust in that situation, because you don't have the brand to rely on. Think about it. It's the equivalent of BYD, the cars, once again. So when BYD first came into the country, everyone was saying, you know what, let's go buy a new car. You know what, I'm actually going to stick with my Mazda, with my Ford, my Holden. I want my SV6, or whatever it is. And now you've got BYD saying, guys, look at me. I'm ready. I've got a great offer. And people are saying, you know what, not so sure, because as a whole, we as Australians, and listen carefully to this, we love being the first to be second, which what that means is let somebody else go first and then I'll follow. So how do we go back to first principles here? Well, we've got to say the product is absolutely a commensurate product. A BYD, for example, it's got the beautiful dashboard screens and it's got leather interior and whatever else you need. Then you say, what about the support? The support is very critical. So the support comes down to, in the case of a BYD, the warranty that you get. So you get a longer warranty on the most important aspect, the battery, than you do with most of the competitor, if not all of the competitor products. And then there's the overall serviceability around, and then you've got consumer protection, because in Australian company, you've got ACCC obligations and all ASIC obligations, all of these things that form an inherent governance to say, you actually have to ensure you are going to look after your customers. I know for me, as a director of the companies that I'm a part of, I have an absolute vested interest in doing the right thing by my customer. And that comes across very clearly when you're speaking with somebody. I am going to do the best thing that I can for you, because the failure of not doing that is pretty drastic, in the sense of, like, let's just say it's a governance failure and I don't abide by an ASIC obligation or an ACCC obligation. I myself will go to prison. I don't want that. So I have a very clear vested interest to say, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and make sure that we are going to de-risk it from you. And we do that to some extent, alluding to the brands that sit behind us. But when they're not known, they're not known. And over time, and this is what BYD did, now everybody wants a BYD. That's why they're the fastest growing electric car company in the country. So first principles.
Yeah, I think BYD, focused on the core problem, right? Which was affordable cars, with high quality. That's what they're looking for. This model where, you're not paying, $80,000 to $100,000 for a luxury vehicle. BYD made it affordable for the everyman to actually get into the car market and get a high quality product that was affordable at the end of the day. I guess, going back, you're focusing on those core problems and that value to the end user. So step through the process of engagement with your customers. Are you trying to tease out those problems? What kind of questions are you asking?
Yeah. So different customers need different things. Sometimes they are it is just transactional. Fair enough. For anything meaningful, like when I say meaningful, truly meaningful, where there's impact, that for me comes down to how do I put myself in my customer's shoes? And then with that, how do I take away their risk? So some of the big ways to take away risk come down to there's risk of execution, there's financial risk, there's reputational risk. So, and we've got, of course, there are others, but just to name some of them, like I did, how do we take some of those away? So the way that we do it is say, once we know that there's a need. So the customer says, actually we've got a live example of a customer that needs to reduce OH&S issues because there's a whole implication for them there. And long and short is, in their particular use case, they've got an operator that's lifting up the equivalent of 2 tons, a single operator, 2 tons per shift. Like, it's crazy. So their use case is, well, let's look at putting a robot or cobot, something to just automate that process at a fairly basic level. Take away any risk of OH&S. Now, it's a fairly, I'm going to say a decent number. We're not talking about like $100. We're also not talking necessarily like $500,000 either. But whatever, there's a fair bit of capital that it's going to be raised as a capital project. In that kind of instance, for a customer that says, we know that this is a good idea, we're a bit nervous. So what do we do there? Fixed price contract, number one. Number two is bank guarantees where required. Like, we're going to absolutely deliver. Number three, ongoing service contracts. Number four, options for other people to also provide a service if they decide they're not so happy with us. Number five, extended warranties. So when you look at all of these different things, that takes away the risk from the customer that we're saying, you know what, if it doesn't work, we don't make any money. We actually lose because you don't end up paying us. So that kind of thing as a whole really ties us to the outcome to ensure that everybody's going to get what they need.
That journey for an end user, you mentioned teasing out what their needs are and helping them to make that decision as easy as possible. But it requires still an education from that user about the technology, about the company. How is that happening these days? In the past, obviously, it was one-to-one relationship with a person. Now with the amount of information available online, how do you see that? What's the best way for them to be educated through that process? At the same time, having the relationship with maybe your sublet vendor. How does that work today?
We are all using, or at least I hope we are, all using AI a fair bit, whether we're using Copilot or Grok, Claude or ChatGPT, doesn't matter. And what I find people are, and this isn't just the three of us in this, many of the listeners would also be asking many, many prompts to their maybe co-pilot or whatever they have on their desktop many times a day. So for a long time, sales has moved from the traditional salesperson with a briefcase that's going to go knock on doors and sales rep. It moved away from there to more of a consultative sale. And I would say today, for the better part, our customers are switched on. Industry is switched on. They know what they know. So what is happening as of today is that merge between essentially consultation and AI to help accelerate knowledge. So when I think of, like, when I look at the two of you and myself included, I would be very confident to say that between the three of us, we have been into more than 1,000 manufacturing sites over time. When you look at your customer and you go and speak to them, whoever that customer might be, they only know their own particular site, maybe another one, maybe 3 at most. But they haven't seen as many as any of us individually have seen, let alone all together. So when we go and we speak to a customer, inherently we are a consultant because we've got such depth of expertise of having been across so many various facilities and so many various industries that we can offer various insights. Now, it's not just a one-way flow of traffic. Something that we do that I do quite a bit is I can come and I can say, yeah, look, these are some of the products, the industries, the case studies, but have a look at your chat GPT. Just type in, how does Innovance compare to any other name brand? See what it says yourself and start playing around like that. And then all of a sudden customers are educating themselves at the same time that we are giving that push to say, guys, actually, let's have a look at it this way.
Yeah, AI is definitely playing its role in our day-to-day lives, especially from a knowledge accumulation and portion. I guess talking to the point of, seeing things out in the world, maybe you can share something that you've seen, um, with your time across manufacturing sites. What's been impressive for you? What was something that you saw out there?
So there was a project that I worked on once with Dulux Paint. So we're talking circa 10 years ago now. But what they said was, we need security of supply. Their facility in Queensland had been completely flooded and it took out all of their supplies. They said, we need to invest in exactly that, security of supply. Let's go for it. Anyway, long and short is, you flash forward to today, they've got a phenomenal facility and you walk into Bunnings and they supply pretty much all the paint in Bunnings and it really is very close to Industry 4.0. Now, how did they get there? Because everyone says, yes, I want to do something like this. But what made them stand out? And I actually put it down to the people that were involved. And I know it's a very kind of loose thing to say. There was a particular project manager, project director, who was very strong, very personable, very fair and reasonable. And he pulled together everybody that it didn't really matter what company you were working from, but there was a greater good. We are doing this because there's a bigger pool. There's something bigger than us as an individual and something bigger than us as a company. Let's make this happen. And that collaboration was a little bit of magic there of getting a great outcome by just mobilizing people. So it's not necessarily the technology and it's not necessarily anything other than true leadership, where you've got somebody standing out and think about some of the best leaders that we've ever come across in our time. And they do it because they pull everybody in the same direction. And like I said, once the cabinets are closed and you can't see what the automation is, like, it doesn't truly make the biggest difference. It's how everything gets translated to get to that point.
What was
And
the enabler? What was the enabler of that?
so what do you mean by the enabler?
So what did they have from a leadership point of view to make sure that that team was aligned? Like, what was the secret sauce there?
Ah, great question. Yeah, I've got to think about that one. I think the the thing that they did was select the best. Let me say it like this: in a team, the best team is not necessarily made up of the best individuals. The best team are the best individuals who can play together, but they might not necessarily be the very best at any of their particular role. So what did that person do? They selected the best team of companies, of individuals within those companies, to say, let's pull this together. And to have that insight, kind of like a UEFA Champions League football coach saying, I'm going to select the best people to play on this team. That is what the guy's secret sauce was.
Through that journey, Howard, they would have had a idea of what they wanted at the beginning of the project. How did it transfer right through the project? Because we always find out we always are subject to what we know now, and as we know more, things evolve and develop. What did you see through that project that caught your eye?
So more than anything, it was, if I put on my customer hat, we know what we need to do, or we know what we want to do. How do we do it? We're not 100% sure. And what would happen there was speak to the various different subject matter experts in the various industry, and let them consult and shift things along as time would go. So it might have been, let's start with this particular MES system. Actually, that's not going to be the best fit for you as we move to something else. You've looked at this kind of HVAC. Maybe that's not the best anymore. That's evolved because there is something newer since the original design.
That's good. And also, let's keep going with your anecdotes. What else have you seen through industry? That's a great outcome. Watching Dulux become an industry four. What else have you seen in your industry travels?
So something that I thought was very topical, certainly at the time, was all around COVID-19. We all remember it. Now, at the time, I was looking after the pharmaceutical side of the Siemens business, and I was just fascinated by everything that was going on. So I was just doing a lot of research and looking and learning. One of the things that came out was that the first COVID vaccine came from a company, BioNTech, out in Germany. And I'm busy watching how this was done with some real true digital twinning of how you get the lipid nanoparticle to be modeled appropriately so that you can get this laminar flow that it gets into the mRNA can be put into it. Anyway, now I remember watching this and thinking, here we are. I'm based in Melbourne. We're in lockdown. This isn't amazing. Can't go more than 5 kilometers. Yeah. And then I think, actually, we have to be able to do something here. So I gave, at the time, my CEO a call, and I say to him, Jeff, I think we've got a good story to tell here. I think we can do something and we can actually really help Australia, because right now we don't know what we're doing. And in this particular case, the big thing that came out for me was right people, right time, right connections, because before long, we were speaking to, like, the CEO had opened the doors to me, for me, to various federal and state ministers, where we were consulting to government saying, guys, this is how we can roll out the COVID vaccine. Because if you think about the pure scale of the challenge here, we are sitting with this pandemic. We don't have a vaccine. There's some kind of rumblings of a vaccine happening offshore. The population is to a large extent in lockdown. We need to vaccinate circa 21 odd million people, and we're going to need 2 vaccines per person. So that's actually 42 million vaccines. How do you actually, never mind just getting it, how do you produce that and then roll it out? It's a massive challenge. So anyway, speaking with the different government and the chief scientists and whatever else, we could take everybody along the journey to get some form of sovereign vaccine manufacturing in country. So yeah, that was a particularly exciting one for COVID, which actually had real impact.
Yeah, I think building, our sovereignty, especially around manufacturing is a huge key for resiliency within our markets at the moment. Everyone's trying to build that sustainable supply chain. How do you see that evolving over the next, 5 years, and what are the threats there to our supply chain?
So I'll start with the threats. The biggest threat that we see is, to a large extent, it's capitalism. So let's look at primary producers, farmers, just as a random example. Let's say they are growing their herbs or whatever it might be. So as a farmer, it's a lot of work. It's very difficult work. Profit margins are being squeezed. You look at what's happening with supermarkets and so on and so forth. And the flip side is they're often sitting on a land parcel, which is actually worth a real small fortune. So for a lot of people, as primary producers, they might be thinking, hard work, sell my land, get a few million, don't really have to stress. That for me is a huge risk that we face. And I don't necessarily blame the individual farmer, but the same story that I say, oh yeah, here's an example of farmers. The same holds true for manufacturing. Look at, for example, what happened in the automotive industry when all the major automotives pulled out. That whole supply chain that was sitting around it, doing fenders and whatever, there's some of the touch-up, that all fell away also. That, for me, is the biggest threat. That said and done, what is like the biggest kind of blessing in disguise that we have around this? We had COVID. That showed us the fragility of our supply chain. We had, well, now we've got the war, which is causing our fuel prices to be through the roof, and us realizing we don't have as much as in storage as we would like. That is causing us to inherently think a little bit differently of how might we do things better? How do we protect our farmer from going out of business because we might not be able to get those mangoes or those that lettuce or that whatever it might be from some other country? Or how do we treat our waste? All of these things come into being because as a country, we have a responsibility to each other, to our citizens, to everybody, to make sure that we've got all round safety, and that's safety of food supply, safety of water supply, safety of being able to go get some of the medicines that we need. We have to have that. And I think with all these kind of global things that are going on, like I'd mentioned, it is very much a blessing in disguise to forcing us to rethink, how do we secure that sovereign manufacturing? Now, the way we do this is, again, coming back to that, we have to do more with less. We have to make sure that as Australians, we can say, we are prepared to pay a slight premium because it is made in Australia and we do have that stronger quality control. But we can't accept a price differential where it's off the charts. So because of that, we just have to add more value, do things smarter, adopt technology, as I said, because that's already helped pull millions of people, billions of people out of poverty. If we can start doing more of that in country, not being so worried about actually we've got an aging population and all the things that are wrong, let's start looking at the things that are right. How do we do things better? And I think to such a large extent that we can talk about AI and all of that kind of digitalization piece. First principles, how do we just do the very basics right? How do we make sure that that particular farmer, that particular OEM can continue to produce and be efficient enough to actually compete with the likes of whatever, Thailand, China, wherever it might be, that they can still export. And that's actually, when I go back to the Dulux example, what they did. They've managed to be competitive enough in Australia to compete globally. Yeah.
No, that's great. I think that's a true message around how sovereignty and how industries are at different maturity levels, I suppose, too. Some are very mature in their transformation and the way they are using the technology or understanding how the supply chain works. So there's not they know how it works, but how to improve their supply chains digitally. Is there any particular industry that you've seen Howard as ticking all the, you see they're actually on a growth strategy around how they are innovating?
It's not particular industries that are necessarily doing a particular sterling job as such, but more so pockets of companies across multiple industries. So if you have a look at, for example, your major kind of consulting firms, Accenture as an example, they are doing phenomenal things in just pushing the wheelbarrow that much further with how they are adopting AI. Then you can have a look at the water industry. So if you look at water, you've got traditionally a very conservative industry that's not really yet within pockets of these different water utilities. You have people that are saying, let's adopt digitalization, let's adopt other random technologies that are going to help us with our efficiency. So it's not as a whole, this particular industry I'm going to put as a standout. It's certain pockets across multiple industries. Yeah.
Are they the rebels? Are they fighting against the general ecosystem, or are they
Yeah.
just trying things new?
So Phil, 100%. I think to a large extent, they are the rebels, because it's we are very often scared to make a mistake, and it's a lot easier to not make a decision than to make a mistake, and that's not a very empowering headspace to be in. The better way is to say, you know what, I trust you, and you're going to make 10 decisions. One of them is going to be wrong, and we're going to lose money on that one decision. But the other 9 decisions are going to more than make up for the one that you got wrong. That's a much healthier space to be. So I think as a whole, we are very lucky to live in a beautiful country like Australia. The comfort that we have is there's a lot of security, of whether it's job security, whatever it might be, we've got that. But that's not necessarily helping us to push forward. So we have to be brave to say, actually, if we want to leave this world in a better state than what we found it, because after all, we are just custodians. Whatever we are doing now, we are the custodian for whoever's going to take it from us afterwards. How do we leave it in a better space than what we found it? And from a manufacturing perspective, we have to have manufacturing. Like I said, people need to eat. People need to have their warmth or cooling or whatever it might be. We have to ensure that that remains. And we're going to do that by making them more sustainable through having a lower cost of production or a higher throughput, or a combination of both, where their job is going to be just produce. That is your job. Produce, produce, produce. Our job is to help support them to produce, and not just them. We've got to support everybody else. That is our job. That's when I said about, essentially, we've been into however many hundreds of different facilities. Our job is to look across those facilities and lift up industry as a whole. Sorry, individual manufacturing or producing or whatever it might be. Their job is to you just kind of row your own boat. We will steady the ocean around you.
Yeah, it does take, as Phil said, those rebels, those people in a business, whether it's one or a group of people, like you mentioned with the Dulux and other examples around pharmaceutical, that was someone to change the status quo. Might not be one industry like you mentioned, but pockets in those industries of people changing how they're doing it, and have a vision to see how it could be better. In parallel to that, Howard, you've done something similar. So you've decided to go out have your own. What is it what's the rebel in you doing, and why are you doing it?
So Ed, thank you so much for that. So look, what am I doing? So the business that I represent, and I'm mindful, I don't want to give too much of a plug, but Universal Systems. So we are here to sustain, to transform, to advance industries across Australia and New Zealand. And by doing so, we're going to build that resilient foundation for innovation, for prosperity, and for those generations to come. So what does all of that actually mean? And I'm really talking to true north here. What's like the mission that we're trying to accomplish? With all those words that I just said, those two examples that I've brought up previously, one of the farmer and the primary producer, of just saying, how do we maintain resilience in our country when it's just becoming increasingly difficult and I've got a financial incentive to just sell out now, coupled with BYD, the automotive car, coming in very difficult at first. It's a mature market, but coming in with all round a better value proposition. Maybe technically you would say competitive, commercially certainly superior. So what are we doing? We are doing exactly that, tying these two things together to ensure that we can be more sustainable within country. Again, people need to eat, people need medicines, we need to treat our waste. And now the way we do that is we find what is happening globally that is really, really, really good, strong. And we've got some master distributorship that we've taken on for some major vendors. Like globally, we're talking comparable revenue to Rockwell, yet growing circa 24% or so year on year. Like seriously major companies. And we're saying, let's look at who's actually doing this best in the world, and let's bring them in and use see further by standing on the shoulders of giants, because the current status quo isn't really working for us. This is why manufacturing is moving overseas. So how can we make it better for us? Well, the whole mission behind what we're doing, let's take best of breed, bring it into the country with all the support, all the care, everything that's needed to de-risk it. That is what we are doing in that space. And thankfully, the reception has been really positive so far. I think it's much the same as, like, again, it's BYD, but for industry, when you can see the strength of something else challenging the likes of, whether it's Mercedes, BM, Audi, Peugeot, Ford, Holden, doesn't matter. When you can see something that can really give somebody a run for all these traditionals, a run for their money, and say, actually, there is something better. That's what we're doing. And again, like, thankfully, it's so far very positive.
Yeah, myself and Ed have had experience in smaller distribution channels and really kind of feel that, I guess, personal connection with our customers when you are a smaller distributor. You know, you're trying to build a brand, build that success portfolio so that, you know, customers have confidence in the offering, you know, based in support and in, I guess, commercial acumen, and also, you know, just general relationship building, the kind of general building blocks that, you know, all good sales organizations operate with. So yeah, it's really great to hear that you're, you know, offering another avenue to the industrial community.
Yeah, thank you. Think it's certainly a tough gig entering into a mature market, no question, but with a strong enough value proposition, because as we said, I think we said earlier, that everything now comes down to just really adding value, having impact. That's actually where we're getting the most runs, and the market will determine what the market will determine. I think they've spoken for BYD, so let's see what they say for us in X amount of years.
I suppose, and it also aligns with your passion and your values as a person. I know for Phil and I, we're very passionate about seeing manufacturing and industry be better and better. We want to, as you said, leave for the next generation, leave something better than we were here. We want to enable, train, educate, teach, and get as many people on the suppose side of thinking and learning. Learning such a good aspect, but but associated to our passion. And I think you share that too, Howard.
Yeah, thank you.
Talking about learning, Howard, Phil and I are constantly on a learning journey. That's something it drives us as well. So obviously you are too. What are some of the key learnings that you're spending your time now these days? Well, obviously with a new business and it must be a lot going on, but give us two or three things that you're really digging into.
So thank you. Look, I would firstly love to say, you know what, I've thrown myself into AI or crypto or something that's maybe a little bit more sexy lately, and I'd be lying, no. Of course, I dabble, but not one of the true experts in eat. So where am I focused, like laser focused? So I'm really, really focused on helping our businesses to helping most vulnerable people that we can, just really pushing in that space. And the people that I meet with and interact with, there's a huge learning that comes in. So the more you do and the higher level that you operate at, the learnings that come. There's a huge element for me in having multiple mentors. So a mentor is not necessarily like a conventional mentor as you might think. Some of my mentors include podcasts, books, includes people that are both older than me and younger than me. It's funny, I was having a conversation with my kid the other day. I've got 3 kids, one of them's 10 years old. And I say, um, Levi, who's your oldest friend that you've got? And he was like, yeah, like so and so, he's 11 years. And I said, no, 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 what about? And I mentioned somebody else who was about 45 or so. And he's like, yeah, actually, he's my oldest friend. And then I was thinking for myself, how would I answer that? And I am super blessed to have friends that are in their 80s, all the way to friends that are in single digits and maybe even teens. And you can learn something from all of these people. So a huge learning curve that I've had in mentoring is through this food charity that I touched on. Most of the people there are early 20s, and the amount that I learn from them is phenomenal. It's a generational different thinking that happens, and I am so much richer for interacting with these people. So, Phil, to answer your question maybe more succinctly, most of my learning is coming from some form of mentoring, be it individuals, older or younger, be it podcasts, be it books, or be it just interacting in a day-to-day business with people that can actually have passion for what they're doing. And I feed off that.
Yeah, I think mentorship is a key role for, you know, pretty much every member of the community, right? Like whether or not you're the mentor or the mentee, you need someone to support you during those learnings, that journey. You can take something from anyone, and that's why we really appreciate your time today coming on the podcast. I guess what could you share as a piece of advice then to the wider community?
Couple of things. One is take a chance. We regret the things we don't do more than the things that we do do. So just give it a crack. We can only be better for it. We as individuals, we as a country, we will be so much stronger by just giving it a crack, trying something. That's number one. The second thing is stay hungry, learn. So this isn't necessarily about going and getting a degree or your master's or something like that. You can learn possibly heaps more by just being interested. And you can't pretend to be interested. You actually genuinely need to be interested, where you can figure out how to program something, whether it's on scratch all the way through to something, a proper commercial coding language. So that's number two. Stay curious. And the third is this isn't about us. So at some point, we hopefully all will stop thinking, "Oh, it's just me and I need to progress my career and I need to make more money or I need to do whatever." But we will get true fulfillment from what we give more than what we take. And when we build things that we can look back on, that's where true pride and true fulfillment is going to come from us. Whether we are building our factories, building our country, building our children, just build something that you can look back and say, this is good, as opposed to the flip side of saying, you know what, I'm in action and I'm going to let things break down. We can't do that. So much better to build up and leave things on a positive.
Yeah, Excellent. Excellent thought process there, Howard. Look, I'm sure people will be listening to the podcast and thinking, how do I connect with Howard? What's the best way for them to connect with you?
So, Vance, the absolute best way, look for me on LinkedIn. I can talk about all things industry, whether it is on the electrical domain, a water domain, or if it's even on a community site. So, LinkedIn, you can find me. My surname is Sachs. So, Howard Sachs. And I would love to connect with as many of you as is possible. Please connect. We can have a virtual coffee or a real coffee or a something. I would love that.
Awesome. Look, we've covered so much in this, from automation, sustainability, Australian sovereign manufacturing. It's been a really great conversation, Howard. So thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I love the work that you guys do in helping to lift up our industry collectively. If we keep on all doing what we do, we will help make Australia's manufacturing great.
Great. And look, and to all our listeners, please don't forget to subscribe. You can see this on YouTube, Spotify, or whatever your favorite media is. And don't forget to subscribe to Unplugged and IIoT podcast for more episodes with industry leaders just like Howard and innovators as well. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.